Hello everybody and welcome back to Girls Got Game. This week we are back with a basketball interview from the one and only Kaillie Hall. Just as a little intro, Kaillie played Team Ontario and Team Canada basketball all throughout high school. She went to Lincoln Prep for high school, which is a preparatory school mainly for female athletes. And she spent 1 year in the NCAA last year and has now come to Ryerson University to study sport media and also play on the women's basketball team. So without further ado, we'll get right into her interview now. Welcome to this week's Girls Got Game interview. I'm Kennedy, and alongside me is first-year Ryerson sport media student and women's basketball athlete Kaillie Hall. Thank you for being here, Kaillie. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So before we get into it, can you just take us through your basketball background and career up to this point?
Yeah, so I've played basketball since about third grade. I've basically been in love with the game since then. I grew up playing rep basketball here in Hamilton with an organization called Transway, which is basically a Hamilton girls basketball club that's been around for many years, and it has a pretty good tradition of success. So I played Transway up until grade 9 at a high level, played with some really awesome people who I'm still best friends with. And then into grade 9, I got a little more serious with things and decided to join the Ontario Scholastic Basketball Association, which was basically a prep league that was created for girls high-performance athletes in Ontario in hopes of helping them get to the next level post-secondary. So I joined Lincoln Prep, I went to St. Mary's Catholic Secondary School, and then from there I was playing at a higher level, I'd say, and that also allowed for more opportunities for me. So going into, I think it was the summer going into grade 10, I made the provincial team for the first time, which was really exciting, and then kind of took off from there and was able to get identified as a targeted athlete through Canada Basketball, and then eventually get involved with Canada Basketball and make that team in high school and represent Canada, which was an amazing opportunity, and then played Ontario basketball up until grade 10. Going back to Lincoln Prep, we won 2 championships that year, my 3 years there, which was just an amazing experience, and I grew a lot as a player, and it really forced me to elevate my game. And then since then, I played in the States last year in the NCAA in Ohio, and then I made the jump to Ryerson this year.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you've had a really in-depth career so far. Obviously, making Team Canada and Team Ontario is a very big feat that I think everyone hopes to make one day for both basketball and athletics in general. I mean, I know playing sports can obviously teach you a lot of lessons both in sport and in life. So how did having those experiences on Team Ontario and Team Canada help shape both who you are as a person and who you are as an athlete?
I think both of those experiences definitely taught me the importance of dedication and commitment. I had to, in order to make those teams and find success there, I really had to focus in on basketball. And I mean, my nutrition had to focus on performance, my sleep, just little aspects that were important to performance, I really had to start to focus on. So it taught me how to really commit myself to something. And obviously that transferred into other aspects of my life, whether that be in the classroom especially. I mean, having good grades was important to me, but also having to balance basketball and being a full-time student was tough. So it really taught me how to manage my time well, even when, some days you don't want to and you kind of didn't have a choice. I think, and also those experiences taught me that everything does work out in the end. It's not always easy, and some days you don't want to get up at 6 a.m. and go lift, but in the end, kind of back to that idea of dedication, the work you put in will show, and the work you put in, ultimately, if it's good work and it's productive work, it will allow you and help propel you to reach your goals, and that goal may change, and that's okay, and you might have unexpected road bumps, but in the end, if you continue to pursue your desires, then you just have to be proud of what you can accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. I know growing up as a high-level hockey player as well, it's hard to manage your time sometimes, and, I wasn't the greatest at it. I did not put school first in high school, but at the end of the day, I still graduated, so it doesn't really matter that much. But I know growing up in hockey, I didn't really have many influential figures in my life in women's hockey specifically. just because women didn't really have that platform to be playing professional hockey when I was coming up through the ranks. So how did the influence of the NBA and the WNBA impact you growing up? Because I know the NBA has done a really good job at promoting not only women in sport, but a lot of other minorities in sport as well.
Yeah, I mean, from a young age for me, I always took a liking to the WNBA. Obviously, being a women's basketball player, you see yourself in some ways with those athletes who are within that league specifically. The NBA has always, I think, just done a good job of supporting outside organizations and causes, especially recently. I mean, I don't know how many photos I've seen of NBA players wearing a WNBA logo sweater to their games, and I think LeBron James does a really good job of speaking out on Twitter and using his platform well. Kobe Bryant did as well. So I think that's really encouraging for the women's game, obviously having that support from their kind of counterpart in that way. But in terms of finding inspiration in professionals, I've been lucky enough to grow up in Hamilton, and I think when you think of women's basketball in Hamilton, the first name that comes to mind is Kia Nurse. I was really grateful to play for her dad and get trained by her sister, and I've just had a really good connection with their family. So growing up around Kia and watching the work she's put in through high school and then even in university, seeing her find success and ultimately reaching the WNBA. And I mean, now she's doing even more amazing things, like working for a sports center, and I mean, she's sponsored by Jordan. Like, that's amazing stuff. And it's hard to see yourself in that position, so I think having someone like Kia within such a tight-knit community, especially Canada, I mean, in many ways, she's Canada's golden girl in basketball, and being able to see her accomplish that stuff is not only encouraging for me, but also for a lot of the younger players that are within these transway organizations and stuff. It's really encouraging, so.
Yeah, I agree. I know the Nurse family is very prominent here in Hamilton. Like, I looked up to Sarah Nurse a lot in hockey, so I'm not surprised at all that, you know, Kia's kind of the same way with young basketball players. And would you say that Kia was your biggest female role model growing up?
I definitely think so. I think just having such a close connection, like, with the family and her, and I mean, I've been grateful, like, just to kind of stumble into her during, like, at gym time and stuff like that. I think just seeing her work has allowed me to just, I mean, I'm all in for her finding success, and just, she is definitely my biggest role model. She just does a really good job of not only promoting her values and what she stands for on her platform, but also her actions speak really loud too, in terms of not only the dedication she puts into basketball, but also finding other avenues for the game off the court as well.
She's definitely a great role model to have. So shifting into the media aspect of sport, you're a sport media student at Ryerson. So what do you aspire to do in the industry when you graduate?
That's honestly a tough question for me, because I feel like every day I'm constantly changing. This semester, or this past year, I guess, because we're almost done, has opened my eyes to a lot of things and just a lot of different opportunities within the industry, which is really exciting. Definitely, I hope to see myself working with the Raptors, but I really, really would love to be a part of that organization and just have some sort of role in community development and, like, community outreach, I think would be cool. Also, I do love social media, so even having a hand in that would be good as well. Honestly, I feel like I change my idea of what I want to do every single day, but the Raptors have always remained consistent, even ever since I was little, before I knew I was going to end up in sport media. I think it's been a dream of mine.
It's funny you say that too, because I remember my goals now versus my goals when I was in first year are completely different. This program opens your mind to a lot of different things that you may not have even considered before, and it teaches you a lot of things. So it's always good to keep your mind open for other opportunities as they come along. So how do you plan to make a difference in the sports industry for women, both on the playing field and in the media?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing, especially this year, I think a lot of us have opened up our eyes a little bit more to the idea of activism and being engaged on, not only in our actions, but also on our platforms. I think the one class we're both taking right now talks a lot about using your platforms as a tool for amplification. And I think that's something that I want to obviously need to continue to do, especially being an athlete. In regards to women in sport, I think in terms of media, not only that idea of amplification, but also showing that in the actions that we do. So I know our team has talked a lot about having Black Lives Matter movements and just stuff we can actually do to demonstrate not only that we're supporting, but like we're also trying to do more and create change in that way. So I do think there's a lot of work to do. And in terms of women in sport, I have really tried to get involved with the youth community in Hamilton, girls basketball specifically, doing training, doing that type of stuff. And I think one area I can personally grow in is just like following up and reaching out to these girls a little bit more, because I know I was once in that position. So I think in terms of that, that's also something else that I could do.
And on a fun note, what has been your favorite basketball memory so far in your career?
Oh my gosh. Definitely a tough call. There's two. I can't pick one. One is regards to Team Ontario. In my grade 12 year, I actually didn't make the Canada team that year, and I ended up going and playing back with Team Ontario, which was awesome. I loved the group, loved the coaches. Like, it was just a really great group. I hurt my ankle 2 weeks before our national championship game, so was working really hard to get back to play. Ended up being able to play at nationals, and we won. And we were the underdogs in that game, and it was just a really sweet experience winning with your best friends, and something I'll never forget. And then also throughout high school, I was able to win 2 provincial championships with, once again, a really great group of players and coaches, so that was both 2 experiences I'll never forget as well.
That's awesome. So I'm glad that you are able to continue your career now at Ryerson, and you've had an amazing career so far. So I wish you all the best in your basketball career and in your sport media studies. And thank you for joining us today. It was a great interview, and it was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Kennedy.
So big shout out to Kaillie Hall for coming on the podcast. It was a great interview. Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. So guys, what did you think?
I love the fact that it was a Ryerson athlete, so we could really imagine her and her situation and everything. I think it really kind of made me miss campus as well and miss all the Ryerson sports. But no, I have so much respect for her being a high performance athlete and the dedication that it takes. And I definitely related to her where, you don't always want to wake up early and grind, but in the end, it's always worth it. And look at her career that she's had so far. It's obviously paid off. It's obviously worth it. And yeah, that was a really good interview, Kennedy.
Thank you. Yeah, I've known Kaillie for quite a long time, and I knew that she's always been active in basketball and obviously a very good basketball player at that. So as soon as I heard we were doing interviews for this, I thought of her right away. And yeah, I'm glad it turned out the way it did, and it was nice to hear her full story a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, and I loved hearing how when she was talking about Kia Nurse and how she's impacted her career and inspired her. I thought that was really cool to hear too, because I feel like as popular as Kia Nurse is, I think a lot of people kind of almost forget about basketball just because it's not, especially the WNBA, just because it's not as promoted as other women's sports. So I really liked hearing about her and how Kia Nurse inspired her in her career.
Yeah, I think that was a really cool point as well. And it's cool to, obviously when female athletes grow up with a female role model, it's something you don't always hear of just because females in sport aren't always promoted, especially to have a role model in your specific sport. But it's even cooler that, they're from the same hometown. Obviously, Kia Nurse is native of Hamilton, right? And she's one of the best female basketball players in the world, I'd say. Now she's pursuing a career in the media as well. So it's pretty cool to be able to, look at her as a role model and also be like, wow, she's from my hometown.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's so cool when she was talking about like how she personally knows Kia Nurse's family and she's seen her at the gym. I feel like that's such a dream come true, especially when you're younger, to kind of see, because Kia Nurse is obviously one of the greatest female basketball players ever. Basketball players ever. And I feel like seeing her and being close with her family is, it's a dream come true for any young athlete. So that was really cool to hear.
Even when she acknowledged the male, the NBA players that advocate and speak up for women, that was a cool topic. And just to see how it impacted an actual basketball player. I don't play basketball, so although I appreciate and acknowledge what the NBA does, it doesn't impact me as much because I don't see myself growing up playing basketball. But just hearing how much that impacted her and how much she acknowledged that was really cool to hear.
Yeah, I feel like this interview ties in really well with our International Women's Day that happened yesterday. I feel like it's important to mention that on the show, that yesterday was International Women's Day, so I feel like this interview is really empowering for women. I mean, just to hear about a female athlete and how was inspired by another female athlete. I mean, it's great. It's just great to hear, and just hearing her story, how she, had to learn time management and had to, balance school and basketball and everything at the same time, and how there were bumps in the road, but it all turned out well. I mean, I think it was just a great interview to kick off after Women's Day.
Yeah, and I think also going off that, you just reminded me about that, Elizabeth, but I know we've talked about it on, I think it was last season or maybe season 3, and we were talking about the new WNBA CBA, and that was the moment I realized, like, when you if you're a male and you get drafted to the NBA, that's your job. That's pretty much your one source of income, versus a lot of the women in the WNBA still have other jobs on top of that. And like when we were talking about the CBA included childcare for when the players were at practice and stuff, and I was like, oh my god, yeah, they have to bring their children into the bubble. Like I didn't think about that at all. So I think hearing that side of her story about how Kaillie had to balance school and playing also just resonates a lot with the difference between women's and male sports. So I think that was also an interesting thing that has to do with International Women's Day too, is just like empowering women to keep going, even when it might be, like you were saying, Kennedy, as passionate as you were about hockey, like sometimes you have to put something on the back burner, and it wasn't going to be hockey. So yeah, that was really cool to hear from her.
I went to a high school that had like a more elite basketball, like males basketball team, and I was in a class with like 2 or 3 of them, and I remember an assignment was due, and I would my volleyball team had made it to like playoffs, so I had a volleyball game and they had a basketball game. They got an extension on the assignment and I didn't ask for it, because for me it wasn't even an option. Do you know what I mean? No, I have to do school and sports. Like that was never a thing. But I just remember coming from a lot of people, how much like special privilege they got, and how it was a bit easier for them to balance school and sports, because sports was like higher for them, and like other people saw that, as opposed to like a lot of the women's teams.
Especially coming out of like a preparatory program as well. Like I know, like it was a regular school, but the program was like tied in with the school. So like especially going off of that, it's almost like, is basketball your priority or is school your priority? Like you have to maintain good grades obviously to like be on the team, I would imagine, because that's how it mostly works. But at the same time, it's like you're there in this program specifically for basketball, right? So it's like that would be hard to balance, just because, like I said, you're going to school for basketball, but you also need to get an education while you're there.
There's this school on Vancouver Island in BC where I am, and you have to play a sport if you're there. You have to be on one of the school teams. And it's a boarding school. Why? I don't know why I'm blanking on the name. They were like one of our rivals for rugby and soccer. Definitely not field hockey. They crushed us in field hockey. Anyways, but I just found it really interesting that you had to be on a school sports team while you were attending that school, and it was a boarding school at the same time, so there was kind of like no escape from that. But I have a lot of respect for athletes that like wake up and dedicate themselves to that, and I think it's really similar to what a lot of women do in sport media. Like a lot of women set out, like in the morning when they wake up, they literally set out to make a difference in women's sport that day, and then they do that every single day. And I think on International Women's Day, I realized like how thankful I am for the women that wake up and do that every day. So yeah, that's what made me think about that. But very thankful for those women and those athletes who wake up and advocate for women's sport every day.
Also, speaking of International Women's Day, I know by the time this episode is up, it'll be like a week past, but still, every International Women's Day, I realize something different. And I always think, like, I'm always like, oh, okay, let's celebrate women. Like, I'm here for that. But like this year, there were so many tweets from people like in our program or just like in the sport media landscape I think every year I'm like, oh, it seems like there's more, which is just so good to hear or to see. But it's just really nice being in a program where even the boys will appreciate the women and like lift them up and really help raise their voices, which is like, I think definitely one of the bigger fears that I had coming into the program was like, oh God, it's going to be like mostly males, right? How loud am I going to have to make my voice to actually be heard? But it's just so nice not feeling that, of course there's competition. We all like sports. We're all here for the competition a little bit, but everyone's still so supportive of all the women, which is just so nice to see.
I know, right? Yeah, I feel like that's a big thing in our program. I feel like everyone is really supportive. Like, I don't remember a time where I felt like degraded or undermined because I was a woman or anything like that. Like, I feel like everyone's so supportive, and everyone will say like, oh, good job, and like, great, like, good job on this project. I see you're doing that outside of school. Like, that's so great. And everyone's really supportive. And yeah, obviously, as Ella said, there's competition, but I almost feel like that competition is good in a way, because everyone's like, oh, this person did that, I want to do that too. And like, it kind of makes everyone work harder. But yeah, in terms of the support, like, I feel like all the guys are so respectful, and also our male professors are awesome and so supportive too. So big shout out to everyone.
One thing that makes me really excited about the future of the sport industry and sport media is that the guys that we have in our program that lift up women and support women in sport, like everyone, all the guys in our program that we know, I think almost all of them posted something for International Women's Day. And it's sad to say that, like, that's surprising because you wouldn't expect a lot of guys to be doing that, but it was such a great surprise, and it made me feel really happy that these are the men that are going into the sport industry. This is the future of the sport industry, and they support women's sports. So when we're in class and we're talking about, oh, like, men don't believe in it, like, organizations and corporations don't believe in, like, supporting women's sports, it's not going to make enough money, not enough people want to watch it. Well, that's an old way of thinking now, because the guys in our program think the complete opposite, and that makes me so excited.
Not only are these guys our classmates, but they're also going to be, some of them we're going to be working with for the rest of our lives, right? So, to have this support now really goes to show that we're just going to continue getting more support and more, like, uplifting messages, I guess, from them and from others as we progress in the industry and graduate and get into the working world.
I guess has been kind of a thing for all 3 years that we've been at Ryerson, but I love seeing, like Kaillie, girls and guys come in to the program who want to work in sport media that have played sports or do play sports, like same with you, Natasha. Like, something about they have experience, they know what it's like to literally be that woman that isn't getting airtime on TV because they don't think it's going to make enough money, blah, 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 right? And I feel like that's just such a good perspective to have. Like, I love having your voice on the show, Natasha, because you can really speak to that and we trust it. So it's like, it was interesting hearing from Kaillie too, hearing her experience. Obviously, it's kind of an awful year to be coming to Ryerson. I don't know how much basketball they've actually done, but I think for her next 3 years, it's going to be great to have her on the team, and then also in sport media, raising that voice and making sure that the women's basketball team gets, enough Rams Live time as they need.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's like, you look at the rosters of the Ryerson teams, in hockey, basketball, there's not really there's almost no sport media people on those rosters, which is kind of weird, because it's like, sport media, kind of, you do sports, you should be on the varsity teams, but then, and most of those people are from, like, I don't know, science or, like, engineering, and it's so weird, but it's so nice seeing, like, someone from sport media on one of those teams.
Just to kind of build on what Elizabeth says, I always found it interesting how, like, even growing up in hockey, how, like, on my teams, I was really the only one that was, like, super, super into sports the way that I am, in the way that, like, we all are, and, like, everyone else had, like, different interests, and they just kind of, like, played hockey on the side, whereas, like, I felt like I was one of the only ones who actually had hockey as, like, a huge, huge part of me, and, like, obviously always has been and it always will be. And I was the only one that really wanted to, you know, go into a career out of it, where everyone else is like, oh yeah, like I play hockey, but I want to go into nursing, stuff like that. I think it's interesting that you said that, Elizabeth, because I've noticed that as well. And it sounds weird, but at the same time, as someone who grew up in competitive sports, it's also like, well, I guess it kind of makes sense. I've played with some elite hockey players who are playing college hockey now, and, you know, they're not studying sport media. So it makes sense because I've seen it, but you know, it's also cool to see those who are playing on those teams and also in sport media as well.
That's something that stands out about Ryerson sport media to me too, is that coming in, I was like, man, I need to know everything about every sport and every player, and I need to get on the stats and everything. And then I started and I was like, if you like sports and if you're passionate about it, that's enough. Like, you don't have to be a pro about every single sport out there. And that was just really, what's the word? Not rewarding, but it was really nice to realize that I didn't have to be that pro person.
There are so many different approaches you could take to sports too, like just like about the engagement, and then there's the stats, and then there's like the stories, the features, and then there's like radio, and there's like just so many like things that I've learned throughout this program that I'm so grateful I've joined, because yeah, initially I thought I just needed to know the stats, but there's just so much more.
Well, yeah, there's so many people even in the sport media industry now who are like pro, like who make features, or who, I don't know, who are producers, who started with like news and who didn't know a single thing about sports, and then their kind of path in life led them to sports. And you know, you don't have to be a sports expert to kind of be in this industry, I feel like.
Well, on that note, I just want to say thank you to Kaillie for coming on our show this week. It was a pleasure to have her. And obviously her interview generated a lot of topics. And we'll be back next week, so we'll see you then.